Penitens was a busy, notable tradesman, very prosperous in his dealings, but died in the 35th year of his age. A little before his death, when the doctors had given him over, some of his neighbors came one evening to see him, at which time he said this to them: "I see, my friends, the tender concern you have for me, by the grief that appears in your faces. And I know the thoughts that you have now about me. You think how sad a case it is to see so young a man and in such a flourishing business delivered up to death. And perhaps had I visited any of you in my condition, I would have had the same thoughts of you. But now, my friends, my thoughts are no more like your thoughts than my condition is like yours. It is no trouble to me now to think that I am to die young or before I have increased my prosperity. These things are now sunk into such mere nothings that I have no name little enough to call them by. For if in a few days or hours I am to leave this carcass to be buried in the earth, and to find myself either forever happy in the favor of God or eternally separated from all light and peace, can any words sufficiently express the littleness of everything else? Is there any dream like the dream of life which amuses us with the neglect and disregard of these things? Is there any folly like the folly of our natural state, which is too wise and busy to be at leisure for these reflections? When we consider death as a misery, we only think of it as a miserable separation from the enjoyments of this life. We seldom mourn over an old man that dies rich, but we lament the young that are taken away in the progress of their fortune. You yourselves look upon me with pity. Not that I am going unprepared to meet the judge of the living and the dead, but that I am to leave a prosperous trade in the flower of my life. This is the wisdom of our natural thoughts, and yet what foolishness of the silliest children is so great as this? For what is there miserable or dreadful in death but the consequences of it? When a man is dead, what does anything mean to him but the condition he is then in? Our poor friend Lepidus died, you know, as he was dressing himself for a banquet. You think it is now part of his trouble that he did not live until that entertainment was over? Banquets and business and pleasures and enjoyments seem great things to us while we think of nothing else. But as soon as we add death to them, they all sink into an equal littleness. And the soul that is separated from the body no more laments the loss of business than the loss of a joyous meal. If I am now going into the joys of God, could there be any reason to grieve that this happened to me before I was 40 years of age? Could it be a sad thing to go to heaven before I had made a few more bargains or stood a little longer behind a counter? And if I am to go amongst lost spirits, could there be any reason to be content that this did not happen to me until I was old and full of riches? If good angels were ready to receive my soul, could it be any grief to me that I was dying upon a poor bed in an attic? And if God has delivered me up to evil spirits to be dragged by them to places of torments, could it be any comfort to me that they found me upon a bed of luxury? When you are as near death as I am, you will know that all the different conditions of life, whether of youth or age, riches or poverty, greatness or meanness, signify no more to you than whether you die in a poor or stately apartment. The greatness of those things which follow death makes all that goes before it sink into nothing. Now the judgment is the next thing that I look for, and everlasting happiness or misery has come so near me. All the enjoyments and prosperities of life seem as vain and insignificant, and to have no more to do with my happiness than the clothes that I wore before I could speak. But, my friends, how am I surprised that I have not always had these thoughts? For what is there in the terrors of death, in the vanities of life, or the necessities of piety, but what I might have as easily and fully seen in any part of my life? What a strange thing it is that a little health or the poor business of a shop should keep us so senseless of these great things that are coming so fast upon us. Just as you came in my chamber, I was thinking with myself, what numbers of souls there are now in the world, in my condition at this very moment, surprised with a summons to the other world. Some taken from their shops and farms, others from their sports and pleasures, these at lawsuits, those at gaming tables, some on the road, others at their own firesides, all seized at an hour when they thought nothing of it. Frightened at the approach of death, confounded at the vanity of all their labors, designs, and projects, astonished at the foolishness of their past lives, and not knowing which way to turn their thoughts to find any comfort. Their consciences flying in their faces, bringing all their sins to their remembrance, tormenting them with the deepest convictions of their own foolishness, presenting them with a sight of the angry judge, the worm that never dies, the fire that is never quenched, the gates of hell, the powers of darkness, and the bitter pains of eternal death. Oh, my friends, bless God that you are not of this number, that you have time and strength to employ yourselves in such works of piety that may bring you peace at the last. And take this along with you, that there is nothing but a life of great piety or a death of great stupidity that can keep you from these apprehensions. Had I now 1,000 worlds, I would give them all for one more year, that I might present to God 1 year of such devotion and good works as I never before so much as intended. You perhaps, when you consider that I have lived free from scandal and overindulgence and in the communion of the church, wonder to see me so full of remorse and self-condemnation at the approach of death. But sadly, what a poor thing it is to have lived only free from murder, theft, and adultery, which is all that I can say of myself. You know indeed that I have never been reckoned a drunkard, but you are at the same time witnesses and have been frequent companions of my excess, sensuality, and great indulgence. And if I am now going to a judgment where nothing will be rewarded but good works, I may well be concerned that though I am no drunkard, yet I have no Christian sobriety to plead for me. It is true, I have lived in the communion of the church and generally attended its worship and service on Sundays, when I was neither too idle nor otherwise disposed of by my business and pleasures. But then, my conformity to the public worship has been rather a thing of course, than any real intention of doing that which the service of the church supposes. Had it not been so, I would have been at church more often, more devout when there, and more fearful of ever neglecting it. But the thing that now surprises me above all wonders is this, that I never had so much as a general intention of living up to the piety of the gospel. This never so much as entered into my head or my heart. I never once in my life considered whether I was living as the laws of religion direct, or whether my way of life was such as would procure me the mercy of God at this hour. And can it be thought that I have kept the gospel terms of salvation without ever so much as intending in any serious and deliberate manner either to know them or to keep them? Can it be thought that I have pleased God with such a life as He requires, though I have lived without ever considering what He requires or how much I have performed? How easy a thing would salvation be if it could fall into my careless hands, who has never had so much serious thought about it as about any one common business deal that I have made. In the business of life, I have used prudence and reflection. I have done everything by rules and methods. I've been glad to converse with men of experience and judgment to find out the reasons why some fail and others succeed in any business. I have taken no step in trade, but with great care and caution, considering every advantage or danger that attended it. I have always had my eye upon the main end of business, and have studied all the ways and means of being a success by all that I undertook. But what is the reason that I have brought none of these characteristics to religion? What is the reason that I, who have so often talked of the necessity of rules and methods and diligence in worldly business, have all this while never once thought of any rules or methods or managements to carry me on in a life of piety? You think anything can astonish and confound a dying man like this? What pain do you think a man must feel when his conscience lays all this foolishness to his charge, when it shall show him how regular, exact, and wise he has been in small matters that pass away like a dream, and how stupid and senseless he has lived, without any reflection, without any rules, in things of such eternal consequence, as no heart can sufficiently conceive them? Had I only my weaknesses and imperfections to lament at this time, I should lie here humbly trusting in the mercies of God. But regrettably, how can I call a general disregard and a thorough neglect of all religious improvement a weakness or imperfection, when it was as much in my power to have been exact and careful and diligent in a course of piety as in the business of my trade? I could have called in as many helps, have practiced as many rules, and been taught as many certain methods of holy living as of thriving in my business, had I but so intended and desired it. Oh, my friends, a careless life, unconcerned and negligent to the duties of religion, is so without all excuse, so unworthy of the mercy of God, such a shame to the sense and reason of our minds, that I can hardly conceive a greater punishment than for a man to be thrown into the condition that I am in, to reflect upon it. Penitens was going on, but had his mouth stopped by a convulsion, which never suffered him to speak anymore. He lay convulsed about 12 hours and then gave up the ghost. Now, if every reader would imagine this penitence to have been some particular acquaintance or relation of his, and imagined that he saw and heard all that is here described, that he stood by his bedside when his poor friend lay in such distress and agony, lamenting the foolishness of his past life, it would, in all probability, teach him such wisdom as never entered into his heart before. If to this he should consider how often he himself might have been surprised in the same state of negligence, and made an example to the rest of the world, this double reflection, both upon the distress of his friend and the goodness of that God, that he had preserved him from it, would in all likelihood soften his heart into holy dispositions, and make him turn the remainder of his life into a regular course of piety. This, therefore, being so useful a meditation, I shall here leave the listener, as I hope, seriously engaged in it.